Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and I hope all of you are having a great day. I know that obviously here in North Carolina, if you look at the weather map over the past couple of days, I'm sure if you turned on, let's say, the Weather Channel, for instance, then you'll see that a certain part of the country got a bunch of snow, and right dab in the middle of that is about where our studio is located. So yeah, we've been having a heck of a time here with snow. Luckily, it's starting to melt and everything's going well. So I hope that if we're doing well, that means that by extension, all of you are doing well. Now, welcome into another edition of the show, and today we have an entire hour dedicated to computer and technology news. I'll be quite honest with you. Today might be the last time we get a full show all to ourselves, just you and me and everyone else who listens. This will be the last day that we get a show to ourselves before the end of the year. Everything else is booked out, and really have a lot of great companies coming on, a lot of great interviews I'm looking forward to. But hey, I also like to just have some one-on-one time, and this will be the last chance for the end of the year. And obviously, speaking of that, I should mention that Computer America will be back on the air January 2nd, I believe. I need to triple check that, but working date so far, January 2nd, we will be back up and running, and the last show of this year will be December 31st? Wow, I'm sorry, December 21st. There we go. December 21st will be the last show of this year. So obviously, we take about a 2-week break there. That is not unusual. We do it every single year, but want to make it perfectly clear where we're going to be. Now, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So, as I said, computer and technology news, all show today a couple of things. computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from the show notes, any articles, videos, anything that we show here on the program today, you can find right there on our website. While you're there, check out some of the stories, some of the articles, check out the video portion of the show, which is also found at twitch.tv/Computer America. We have a chat room there if that's more of your flavor. And in the meantime, we also have a collection of all the different podcast services that we are on. The podcast is simply today's show, rebroadcast. Also, sometimes there's a little bit tacked on at the end, but hey, we try to save the best of it for, of course, the radio show. I think with all that being said, we're just going to jump right into it, and yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So today, Computer America, computer and technology news. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, we have a lot of different stories. They span everything from product to legal to cars to music to jobs and economy to automation. a lot of different stories. They're all a lot of fun, and I can't wait to, of course, get into them. And I think the first one that we're going to do is actually the story here. And I was kind of poking through it. I think the article is a bit too long to, completely do the entire story, but I do think it's very interesting. We'll have a link to it in the show notes, but it's about the story. And I think that this really goes to show that sometimes law and tech, while sometimes people who legitimately do bad things in technology, they don't get their comeuppance. And, that really sucks. But then there's the other side where, based on old laws that really don't apply anymore, people get unfairly punished, like really to the point of cruelty. And that might just be today's, the story here with this article from The Verge. And this is written by Addie Robertson. Very, very long, very detailed, very nice read. Definitely go check it out. But we'll get the opening and we'll have a little discussion, and then we'll move on to the next one. But this was cool. So the title of this article: How a Telescope Forum Feud Ended with Prison Time. That's right. So this happened when and the article starts that when the FBI appeared at David Goodyear's doorstep in August 2016, they started asking him about telescopes. Makes sense. The 42-year-old IT specialist and avid stargazer had frequented an astronomy forum called Cloudy Nights. Now, someone had taken the forum offline with a denial of service attack, and the evidence pointed to Goodyear. So a denial of service attack, that happens to be something that when you get a bunch of fraudulent traffic, a bunch of requests for information from the server, and you bombard it with just untold amounts of traffic. And in most cases, a lot of companies and a lot of servers are not set up with the software to handle that kind of thing. So they get taken down, and let's say your average person goes there, tries to find, let's just say Google.com. Google.com is hit with a denial of service attack, and next thing you know, the legitimate traffic cannot be differentiated from the fraudulent traffic, and no one can use the whole service. So that is what a denial of service attack is, and looks like Goodyear was the one doing it. And he said that Goodyear swore innocence at first, but after increasingly pointed questioning, he confessed. One of his accounts had been banned a couple of weeks ago, he said, and in a sudden rage, he'd spammed the site with not too nice pictures, then posted its address on a site called hackforums.net, asking for someone to attack it. And obviously he was upset, and he told everyone, hey, hack this forum. And they, of course, he told his visitors, one from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and another from the Los Angeles Police Department. Obviously, two gentlemen you definitely don't want showing up at your door. And he said he did this in the heat of the moment. So his visitors seemed mildly amused by the forum drama, and he chatted with them about his $100,000 telescope collection before they left. But here's the kicker. 1 year later, Goodyear was arrested, saying that in December 2018, he was sentenced to more than 2 years in prison for violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. I got to be honest, I've been in technology for a number of years now. I can safely say that, I have some experience here, and I have never heard of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It's a very old law. But under this act, it's said that it's a sentence that even Goodyear's victims don't want him to serve, saying that a single forum post was enough to direct a temporarily devastating attack on a small business, while federal computer crime laws meant that the same post could now come with lifelong consequences. Now, here's the thing. They said that on August, the article goes into how essentially they caught him, kind of what the forum is about. But again, it's a telescope enthusiast, astronomy enthusiast forum, and underneath this, and of course he was banned back in 2013, and he was mouthing off the moderators, and of course whenever a situation like this happens, saying that, hey, I was just angry, I was just whatever, generally the people being toxic online were being much, much, much more crass than just quote unquote mouthing off. So anyways, under this act, they said that he was able to get, let's see what they finally sentenced him to. A judge sentenced him to a $2,500 fine, $27,000 in restitution, and 26 months in prison for a single DDoS attack. An attack that, and I'm sure is listed in the article here. I think, let's see. Yeah, so it's, let's see. So screenshot his account. So they DDoSed it for about one night. And for that, $2,500 fine, $2,700 to the forum, and 26 months, over 2 years in prison. And that, of course, was excessive. I don't think even, in the article says here, that even the people who were affected by his, just being a bad person, but even the people who were affected by this said that that's way too much. It's way too much time for something so simple as attacking the forum. I mean, paying restitution, that might have been completely called for. $26,000. I guess if they have documents proving that that's what it cost, then perfectly okay. But the jail time for this kind of act, man, there must have been something going on. So they said that the 34-year-old Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which tech policy expert Tim Wu has called, quote, the worst law in technology, is controversial for many reasons. And one of the most common is its harsh sentencing rules. That's right. Judge-based jail times on a range defined with the United States Sentencing Guideline rubric, which calculate a number of representing a crime severity. And they said that the CFAA, or this act that he was under, makes the number unusually easy to inflate. Prosecutors can bump up the estimated cost of a hack with loosely related expenses, or lowball it if a defendant cooperates. So lots of wiggle room, and obviously technology and judges, not a lot of them are experts in technology. So prosecutors can, of course, bump up, like I said, bump up the cost of the attack. They can add extra penalties for using sophisticated means and special skills, even for fairly simple actions like running a script. And running a script is about as easy as you can get. You download it, you get the proper software, and you become a hacker. Now, obviously, we're going to stop the story here, but I did find that very interesting that someone who took down a random forum, and there are thousands of forums all over the internet, just like this one, and one bad apple suddenly has a felony on his hands, 2 years in prison, and thousands of dollars to repay. It goes to show that the law, even when they do finally get someone and they can actually convict them of a crime, sometimes it's disproportionate to what they actually done. There's a lot of room to grow. There are people getting off scot-free all the time, and then there are people who are severely punished for minor offenses. This one's interesting, and it's one of the few times we see technology kind of go the other way. So I thought that was pretty cool. Obviously unfortunate for him, but nonetheless, there you go. Okay, so there's that one. Let's do something a little bit lighter, a little bit happier. Okay. A megapixel. The number really doesn't matter. Like, the definition of a megapixel doesn't really matter. It has something to do with phones. It has how many, the pixel density that a camera can take. But at the same time, pixel density, or megapixels, is not the only factor in taking a good photo. You could obviously check back some of our conversations we've had with Sandy Berger. She's very, very well versed in this, and our conversations generally lead to conversations that megapixels, they're something, but they're not everything. And a lot goes into making a good camera. But they're one of the easiest indicators that people can point to and go, this phone has a 12 megapixel camera. That phone has an 8 megapixel camera. The 12 is better than the 8. Not always the case, but it seems to be a way that people differentiate phones. Well, with that being the case, we now run into Honor and Xiaomi. So obviously 2 Chinese phone manufacturers. And yeah, 48 megapixel. Holy crap. That's a lot of megapixels. Now, Sony and Samsung both announced a 48 megapixel, which is huge, image sensor designed for smartphones earlier this year. And we're starting to hear details of the first devices that make use of the massive pixel counts. Honor has just pre-announced that the View 20, which uses Sony IMX586 sensor, and Huawei's Kirin 980 processor and the same hole-punch selfie camera, set to be revealed in full next week. But we're getting an early sneak peek, and again, the big selling point here is going to be the quality of the camera. Let's see. So both Samsung and Sony are making similar claims about their sensors. They have tiny 0.8 micron? I don't know, 0.8 pixels, but the sensors themselves are physically larger than most competitors at an overall size of half inch. Okay, whatever. The company both says that each individual pixel can take information from its neighbors to produce the equivalent of a 12 megapixel image captured with 1.6 pixels. So for comparison, Pixel 3, iPhone 10, 12. Okay, so looks like it's not exactly a 48 megapixel sensor like they claim it can, but this is through some a very good quality camera and some software behind the scenes to, I guess, interpolate the pixels in between these and actually make a 48 megapixel image. Again, megapixels don't mean everything because there's everything from contrast to color to shutter speed to all kinds of little nuances to a camera that a phone is just never going to be able to compete with things like a DSLR or what have you. But at the same time, if they can actually produce this, it might actually take one of the best photos out there. And again, Samsung and Sony are both using this, or are going to be using this. Huawei, of course, has their finger in this, and Sony, and it's going to be a rush to see who can have the best camera in the phone. I know that a lot of phones are used for productivity. A lot of them are used for just general laying around, reading news and what have you. But a huge market is, of course, using your camera or using your phone as a camera. And they want to make sure that they have the best of the best. We'll see if it pays off for them. But at the same time, just hearing that 48 megapixel title, that's pretty darn impressive. Okay, so there's that one, and again, everyone, if you would like, you can always join us over at twitch.tv/Computer America or at our website, computeramerica.com, for any of these news stories that we're talking about, or the chat room, all that right there. Now, okay, a lot of different ones. That one was pretty cool, but I think, okay. So from high technology to low technology. And no offense, we've had companies on the show, let's say from Brother, we've had companies such as HP on the show talking about the latest of their tech. And sometimes we have companies, your Epsons and your, whatever, that still make a fax machine. And as sad as it is, I think most consumers no longer have any need for a fax machine unless a business makes them. Unless you have to, they only accept faxes. That is a serious shortcoming in a lot of companies, but it's a big part of these companies' bottom lines. They rely on massive institutions buying fax machines. As dated as you may think they are still in use. But that might change for a particular institution, and that one being the National Health Service. That, of course, being in the UK, and looks like the National Health Service is told to ditch absurd fax machines, which, when you consider what a fax does, essentially it will send an image of a piece of paper to another fax machine. Sounds a lot like, phones, doesn't it? Well, or even email. But here we are. In July, the Royal College of Surgeons revealed that nearly 9,000 fax machines were in use by the National Health Services in England, where the Department of Health said a change to more modern communication methods was needed to improve patient safety and cybersecurity. Because obviously, fax machines are not foolproof, they're not infallible, they're definitely hackable. A lot of the modern ones that we've seen actually keep a copy of the images, which then can be compromised in other ways. Fax machines are not flawless. They're there simply because they have been before. No real reason to keep a fax machine. Now, an RCS spokesperson, again, the Royal College of Surgeons, said that they supported the government's decision. And in place of fax machines, they said that secure email should be used. Obviously, emails are much more, how do you call it? Email is much more flexible than a fax machine. Better than just an image of a sheet. You actually get, many kinds of attachments. Now, let's see. So he added it was crucial that the health services invested in better ways of communicating the vast amount of patient information that is going to be generated in the future. I don't think anyone's going to be fighting this. The only one who was fighting this were again these large institutions like, let's say, the National Health Services that had, as they said, 9,000 fax machines. Now, 3/4 of the trusts in England replied to the survey, 95 in total. 10 trusts said that they did not own any fax machines, but 4 in 10 reported more than 100 in use. It seems like if you are an organization that has a fax machine, odds are you have hundreds of fax machines, and you have a lot of money invested in keeping those things around, because every year that you continue to use fax machines, as opposed to setting up some kind of secure email server and retraining all of your employees to use emails instead of faxes, is another year that you kick the can down the road and you save yourself money. Clearly, that's it. Now, let's see. A lot of quotes here, but wow, yeah, and hey, let's just end the article with this nice little tidbit. Again, this coming to us from the BBC, and at the very end of the article, they gave us facts, where the first facsimile machine was invented in 1842 by Scotsman Alexander Bain. 1842, and we're still using the stupid thing. Crazy. Bain's invention worked by scanning a message written with special ink on a metallic surface. This picked up the electrical impression of the original, and a telegraph circuit could be used to transmit it. By the beginning of the 20th century, fax machines were being used commercially by organizations such as newspaper. And after technological improvements by Japanese companies, fax machines became widespread in the 70s and 80s. Still, 30 to 40 to 50 years after the fact, I think it's time to move on. Where the technology reached its peak around the end of the 20th century and has then gradually been replaced by more modern methods of communication, unless, of course, you have dealt with any law firm, doctor's office, or anything else that requires a stupid certified letter. Admittedly, I've seen a lot of advancement. Whenever signing important legal documents, they let you now sign these things electronically or digitally. Great to see, but I think fax machines are still here for quite some time. But the beginning of the end, it's been a slow death for the fax machine, but the beginning of the end, I think, is definitely here. And there you have it. So there's the fax machine. happy to see it go. Speaking of happy to see things go, every time it seems every time Google Plus has a data leak, its life gets cut in half. I guess that is, that's apparently what it is. So check this out. Google, the company, they own pretty much whatever you do. Google will shut down Google Plus 4 months early after a second data leak. Although I don't like how they title that. So obviously this is just me being a nitpick, but they kind of imply that the first data leak was the cause for it to end, and the second data leak was what caused the service to close 4 months earlier. Admittedly, the first data leak, and again, if you're not watching, I'm using air quotes, that was an internal penetration test that they did. They hired a security firm to look for any vulnerabilities. They found one that allowed a lot of companies to allowed a lot of app publishers. There we go. That's the word. App publishers to potentially steal or mine information from a lot of accounts. And while that would have been a data leak if anyone else had found it other than Google, let's face it, Google was the one to find it, and they were the one to patch it before it was ever used in the wild. There has been no evidence that Google Plus information has been leaked to the wild. That's why I have issue with it saying that, this is the second data leak. But hey, let's find out about the second one. The first one is, we'll see what happens. So Google will shut down Google Plus 4 months early on the second data leak. Figure out why. Now, Google Plus has suffered another data leak, although again, kind of debatable whether or not there was a first one. And Google has decided to shut down the consumer version of the social network 4 months earlier than planned. They said that Google Plus will now close to consumers in April rather than August. Additionally, the API access to the network will shut down within the next 90 days. Now, according to Google, the new vulnerability impacted 52.5 million users who could have had profile information like their name, email address, occupation, and age exposed to developers, even if their account was set to private. Apps could also access profile data that had been shared with a specific user, but was not shared publicly. I wonder what that means. Shared with a specific user, but not publicly. Maybe that would mean communications. I sent this picture, so now all developers can see what picture I sent. Maybe things like that. Now, obviously, in October, Google Plus, a similar Google Plus vulnerability was revealed to have exposed private data to developers for as long as 3 years. Although, again, it was a bug, and there's no proof that anyone ever took advantage of it. Google had found out about it after, obviously, this had gone under the radar for so odd years. They patched it, and then the fact that they patched it didn't come out till months later. That was the first one. I'm beginning to see, through reading this article, there was probably some other kind of bug. There was another one. It, as I said, could have potentially leaked their profile information, like everything that you gave Google voluntarily, and that's why they're closing even earlier. Honestly, this seems to be a bigger play for closing Google Plus down earlier. I don't think Google obviously wants to keep running Google Plus. If anything, this kind of story actually helps Google with their cause. This is actually good for Google in a certain kind of way. They said that, quote, with the discovery of the new bug, we have decided to expedite the shutdown of all Google Plus APIs, which will occur within the next 90 days. And again, the other half of the quote, closing in April 2019. Google discovered the bug as part of its standard testing procedure and says that there is no evidence that the app developers that inadvertently had this access for 6 days were aware of it or misused. And obviously Google can see who pulled what data, when, and how much. They would know for a fact if anyone misused this data. Google says it's begun notifying users and enterprise customers who were impacted by the bug, saying that we understand that our ability to build reliable products that protect your data drives user trust, blah, blah, blah. The point is, Google should not be punished for what is in this article. Google should not be looked down upon for running regular security checks and finding vulnerabilities, fixing them, and then saying, hey, you know what, the service, it's getting out of hand, no one's using it, it's more of a liability than it is a benefit, we're shutting it down. Good job, Google. Can't say anything bad about that. Everyone, we'll be right back. More computer and technology news right after this. Everyone, stay tuned.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. If you missed any part of today's show, please check out the podcast, which is essentially the rebroadcast of today's program. And you can, of course, find a lot of other shows there. And be sure to check out computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find the show notes for today, which will have links to all the stories that we're doing and more. And, of course, articles, reviews, things like that. A lot of fun. Now, you know what? For one of our chatters in the chat room, that of course will be Fort. This one is pretty long. We're going to see how short we can make it, but I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention because the idea that you can keep yourself private, in a lot of ways, that's hard to do. You know, the idea that all you do is go from Google to DuckDuckGo, you use Mozilla instead of Chrome, you use Outlook instead of Gmail, and suddenly you are good to go. It's not easy. There are, of course, services like VPNs that you can use. There are a lot of services that tout, that they take the barest minimum of information while you surf. There are ways to block cookies. There are ways to block scripts. But there are other ways to identify you. And this one, it's not exactly about browsers. It's not exactly about email. But what this is about apps. Apps and smartphone. And check this out. It's Yeah, your apps know where you were last night and they're not keeping it a secret. This is a great article from the New York Times, looks well researched, very, very long. Not going to be able to get to it all, but it shows some ways that these companies and these apps, more specifically, obviously Google obviously Google is doing it. Obviously your cell phone carrier is doing it. Obviously Facebook is doing it like crazy. A lot of these services are doing this. It's just, do you really know about it? Now, your apps know where you were last night and they're not keeping it a secret. Dozens of companies use smartphone locations to help advertisers and even hedge funds. They say it's anonymous, but the data shows how personal it is. And that's the point. A lot of these companies will say, we have stripped the personally identifiable information from you. No name is ever attached to the data points that we send. There's no way to say that this data point belongs to Ben. But that's simply not the case. That's not the case. So obviously the millions of dots on the map trace highways, and you can see, the picture here. Pretty cool. But they said that each one followed the path of an anonymous cell phone user. One path tracks someone from a home outside of Newark to a nearby Planned Parenthood, remaining there for more than an hour. Another represents a person who traveled with the mayor of New York during the day and returns to Long Island at night. Obviously, you're seeing where this is going. Where yet another leaves a house in upstate New York at 7 a.m. and travels to a middle school 14 miles away, staying until late afternoon each school day. Only one person makes that trip, and that is Lisa McGrin, a 46-year-old math teacher, and her smartphone obviously goes with her. And that's the point. And, there are some great infographics here. If you're watching, you can see them here. Where they said that the app tracked her as she went to a Weight Watchers meeting and to her dermatologist's office for a minor procedure. It followed her hiking with her dog and staying at her ex-boyfriend's home. Information that she found disturbing. Saying, quote, "It's the thought that people finding out those intimate details that you don't want people to know." And like many consumers, Ms. McGrin knew that the app could track people's movements, but as smartphones have become more ubiquitous and technology more accurate, an industry of snooping on people's daily habits has spread into a massive intrusion. And again, this little infographic here shows exactly the route that she takes, her starting location, which is her home, her end destination, which is the school, how long she's there, when does she get back, and everything else in between. They said that Lisa McGrin is the only person who travels from her home to school where she works, and she was recorded more than 800 times there, often in her classroom. If you wanted to spy on Lisa McGrin, the teacher in this article, there is nothing better than the cell phone she is carrying in her pocket to track her. She said that a visit to a doctor's office is also included. The data is so specific that the Times could determine how long she was there. And again, this whole thing is a big article by the New York Times to really show one person and how accurate tracking has become. They said that Ms. McGrin's location data shows other often visited locations, including the gym and Weight Watchers. Essentially, you will be able to see her entire life laid out digitally. In about 4 months of data reviewed by the Times, her location was recorded over 8,600 times on average, once every 21 minutes. And the point is, it's not even about her. It's not even about, it's not even about this one person who had her phone accidentally set up in the wrong, with the wrong settings and the wrong personal settings, but rather she is an everyman. She is everyone that you've ever talked to who owns a smartphone. They are taking the exact same measurements that her phone is taking. And as this article found, I believe it'll say it a little bit later in the article, there were about 1,200 Android apps and about 200 Apple apps that were given access to location tracking. And that sounds like it might have been a HIPAA violation. Obviously, if nothing else, this very well could be a Fourth Amendment issue. I don't quite know if HIPAA applies here. Obviously, not allowing someone's personal information such as medical history, and if they go to a dermatologist or if they go somewhere for medical treatment, that's and suddenly every company on earth knows that she goes to these medical facilities to receive treatments. That might be a HIPAA violation. Not too sure, but there's probably a legal case in there. But if nothing else, if law enforcement, and I'm not even saying if law enforcement, I'm saying that the government and law enforcement have access to all of this information and probably more besides, because obviously governments and law enforcement agencies are installing their own tracking and surveillance methods. If they're able to do this, they're able to track you, monitor you unjustly, anyone, anytime, anywhere. It's simply just the way it is. Now, they said that at least 75 companies receive anonymous, precise location data from apps whose user-enabled locations to get local news and weather or other information. The Times found, and that's according to the New York Times. Several of those businesses claim to track up to 200 million mobile devices in the United States, where about half of those in use last year. 1 out of every 2 people. If you think you're not affected, if it's not you, then it's someone that you live with. If it's not someone that you live with, it's a relative that you know. 1 out of every 2 people this is happening to. And they said that the database reviewed by the Times, a sample of information gathered in 2017, held by a single company, a single company, reveals people's travels in startling detail, accurate to within a few yards, and in some cases updated more than 14,000 times a day. That's tracking. That is monitoring. And definitely, obviously, in the chat room, a quote, taking it to the next extreme, saying, what if that data is sold to, let's say, your health insurance? Saying that you visited too many restaurants, you ate out too much over the course of a month, wherever it may be, and they were able to tick off, say that, hey, this person has poor eating habits. We've tracked them at these locations. We have to penalize you for doing that. Tracking. Let's see. Next paragraph. These companies sell or use or analyze the data to cater to advertisers, retail outlets, and even hedge funds seeking insights into consumer behavior. It's a hot market, obviously, where advertisers are reaching an estimated $21 billion a year. IBM has gotten into the industry with its purchase of the Weather Channel's app, and the social network Foursquare remade itself as a location marketing company. Foursquare, you know them. They are massive when it comes to websites. And prominent investors in location startups include Goldman Sachs and Peter Thiel, the PayPal co-founder. A lot of big money is pouring into this because they know the data is king, and there's a lot of it being collected. It's a problem for people who don't want to be surveilled. But hey, the average consumer, your best interests are not really at heart here. So they said that's all right. So they have an instance here, Planned Parenthood, New Jersey. A device arrives at approximately 12:45 p.m., entering the clinic from the west entrance. It stays for 2 hours, then returns home. And this is an example where they can take a picture of exactly the location where it is using Google Maps or Google Street View, Earth View, whatever. They know what institution they went into, how long they stayed there, and when did they leave, where did they go after they left. All of that by simply having your phone on and in your pocket. These things are precise. They are so super precise. Obviously, Planned Parenthood, this is something that they pick because obviously a lot of health services happen in Planned Parenthood. It's not just an abortion clinic. A lot of health services are provided there. But let's say that you still like to keep yourself discreet for whatever you're being treated for. Hey, maybe your insurance company will ask you, why did you go to Planned Parenthood? What procedures are you receiving? Or they'd be able to contact the institution itself. You're trying to do something under the table, try to quietly take care of something, and they know where you went, how long you were there, what kind of procedures could possibly take place while you were there, and they'd be able to contact them and say, hey, we have this customer. What happened here? Why were they there? It's not hard to see that they can connect the dots so easily. Healthcare facilities are among the most enticing but troubling areas for tracking. And they said that Tell All Digital, a Long Island advertising firm that is a client of a location company, says that it runs ad campaigns for personal injury lawyers targeting people anonymously in emergency rooms. You heard that right. People who enter emergency rooms are then targeted with ad campaigns for personal injury lawyers. Don't get me wrong. It kind of makes sense. If you're in an emergency room, there might be a much better chance than the average population that you have been hurt and not by your fault. But when receiving medical services, for getting a broken leg fixed, maybe that's not the best time to track someone and say, hey, we need to get an ad to them right now. Let me track them and let me pay you to get to these exact people. It's scary. They said that jail, schools, military base, nuclear power plant, even crime scenes appeared in the data set that the Times reviewed. One person, perhaps a detective, arrived at the site of a late-night homicide in Manhattan, then spent time at a nearby hospital and returning repeatedly to the local police station. Obviously, they can track everything that happens. Let's see. So here's a device. Most likely, a child is tracked from a home to a school. A car, and you can see an image here where obviously a lot more safety is tried. A lot of people try to emphasize the safety of children. You're not allowed to collect certain kinds of information from children. Kids are not to be tracked or advertised to by certain means. Kids are off limits, except when they have a device and they quote unquote anonymize it. But there's no real getting around it when you look at the exact data that they're putting here and they're visualizing for you. The device pulls up in a car, 7:30 a.m., gets dropped off at a school, and then the device wanders around the schoolyard for a little while, goes into school, and leaves at the end of the school day. Kids are not supposed to be tracked, but hey, this can only be a kid that is actively being tracked, and that data of course has been sold to these collection services that keep all this. Let's see. And by the way, chat room, are they tracking dumb phones too? Old school flip phones, for example? Yes, they, and this isn't listed in the article anywhere, just from my personal experience. They are being tracked by pings going to cell towers. They know which device through SIM cards or other identifiers. They know that when a phone was pinged, and they actively track those pings. Services such as the National Security Agency, the NSA, that's why they built those massive databases. They don't just collect cell phone tower pings, but they also collect entire phone call conversations, text messages that go through, any kind of communication through a cell phone, smart or not. Obviously gets collected and categorized for the government. It goes through the cell carriers that actually provide the cell towers that we all use. And obviously, more data is going to flow through a smartphone. But just because you don't have a data plan doesn't mean that data is not actively being collected from you. Yep. So let's see, something I've disliked. Sign up. Yeah, and obviously, so the article goes on for a bit, and you can see here that they started to track many other devices. Many of them, of course, being kids. This article, you guys should really honestly probably go read it for yourself. And really, it's the next part, and I think the last part, it really wants to make here. Actually, the last 2 points. The first one to ask, are people really aware? Are people really aware of what this article is laying out here? Because, every time an app says, hey, we'd like to use your location to provide you with better service. I think people get that. People get that if they turn on location tracking, like let's say MyFitnessPal, it's a popular app on smartphones. It tracks your steps taken using the sensors within your smartphone. It tracks your route, how far did you go, things like that, and it can do all that by turning on your location services and keeping them on throughout the entire day. But do people really know beyond, hey, it's going to tell me I took 10,000 steps today, which is cool. But do they really know it tracked where you went, how far you went, and it's packaging all of that up to sell to advertisers? And to say that, well, they're stupid if they don't think about that. They're stupid if they don't assume that that's happening. The full extent is something that is actively hidden from people. Advertising companies, the companies who sell this data and use the data, analyze the data, they do a lot of cool things with it. But they also don't want you to know the exact extent for which they can actually do this. Another point that they make here, you can see an image here on the video portion. Everything from, let's say, mega churches to nuclear power plants, you can track people's exact, and by the way, this power plant is actually in India, but you can actually track employees' exact movements. And these are data. These are data points from a single company that is able to track people all around the world. Imagine having access to all of the data. Imagine being an advertising firm that can combine multiple data sets. Or if you're Google, or if you're Facebook, imagine Facebook and what they can do, because they're not just on cell phones, they're on people's home computers. They are scouring every single thing a person does on any device at all times. Imagine Uber, who can track individuals on where they go on a day-to-day basis. I keep saying imagine, but really this is happening. It's for people to say, well, you should assume this is happening. No one has a really good grip on what's happening with this data. And the article really has the last one saying that following the money, apps form the backbone of this new location data economy. Targeted advertising is by far the most common use of the information. Why haven't you heard about this? Why are you kind of kept in the dark about this? It's because the more you realize it's happening, the less you'd be okay with it, and the more you might actually change your habits to curtail this kind of targeted advertising. But hey, if you're kept in the dark, doesn't matter. You will keep siphoning your data off, and you'll be okay with it. You will be okay with Google and Facebook and all these phone companies, cell carriers, all of them collecting your day-to-day habits. I think we're going to end it there. Well, obviously this article very much detailed. We just kind of went over the basics, but I'm sorry if I was the one to break it to you. Even I learned a couple of things myself through this article, but it's very scary, and it's very important to keep that in mind. And you know what? This one actually ties in pretty well with that story. So obviously, think about everything we just talked about, and now get this. All those data points who are going to tell you exactly who this person is. Now, Imagine if a company, let's say Facebook, just pick a social media company. Definitely don't imagine Google Plus, but imagine Facebook, and they want to sell you advertising. Targeted advertising is the number one use of this data. If they want to get you to click on something, they are going to know where you shop, what you do, who you hang out with, where you work, if you go to church or not. They are going to know so much about you. If they want to target you with something that you will probably click, they're going to get it. And what's one of the best things that catches the person's eye? It's news. But let's say if you try to target, let's say a Second Amendment supporter, something controversial, something that obviously people land on very hard on one side or the other, and they wanted to make sure that you click on something so that they get a click through and they get paid, you get advertised to, everyone's happy, except obviously you're being manipulated, but we'll ignore that for now. They can do that. And that's why this article is so upsetting. This coming from Pew, a great research company. Social media, for the first time, tops newspapers as a news source for U.S. adults. Yeah. Say what you want about newspapers. Yes, some of them, they have their biases. Their editors have a story to push. They can, they themselves are ad supported, but they don't have the ability to tailor make a news feed that appeals to you, manipulates you into clicking and viewing and engaging. That's just the way of it. And now we are quickly heading into that direction. Clickbait indeed. We try to keep clickbait to a minimum here on Computer America, but hey, I do like to stoke the fire sometimes. Anywho, TechCrunch, Pew, social media is it's really the new. And let's see. So we have a couple of charts here. More Americans get news often from social media than print newspapers. Print newspapers, they're on the decline. I'm surprised that they were even 20% back in 2016. They're down to 16% in 2018. Social media is now at 20%, radio 26%, news websites 33%. Hey, Computer America, we have a website. Get it from us. Trust us, please. We like you. 33%, and television down over 2 years from 57 to 49%. Wonder what has been happening over 2 years, but I digress. I'll use newspaper. Yep, there you go. So they said that the change comes at a time when newspaper circulate is on the decline and its popularity as a news medium is being phased out. I think that's obvious. And honestly, yes, there's like a 2% increase in from social media 2 years ago to now. And for print newspapers, 20% to 16%, so 4% decrease. At the same time, news websites have gone from 28 to 33, a 5% increase. I think if print newspapers are not a dominant source of news, it's because people would rather go to the NewYorkTimes.com, would rather go to the WashingtonPost.com, would rather go to CNN.com, would rather go to, take your favorite newspaper and enter .com, and instead of receiving early morning last night news, you now receive today's news. If no other reason, I think that's the primary change. It's not that people don't trust newspapers. It's not that people trust social media more now. It's more to the fact that newspapers are just on their way out. Let's see. So while the decline of print has now given social media a slight edge, it's nowhere near dominating other formats. And hey, good news for us, being on the radio, even radio saw an uptick going from 25 to 26%. Now, so obviously television dominates as a news source for older Americans. They have another chart here. You can see it, the 65 and over, 81% receive their news from television, including newspapers. But the younger you go, the more you head towards social media and to radio. radio is a good mix across all of them except the the younger generation. But it's okay. We have a podcast for the younger folk. Everyone, this hour flew on by. I have nothing else to say. It's been a fun show, and I'm glad that you could all join us. If you want to get into more detail about this article and more, you can check it out at computeramerica.com. But in the meantime, hey, we're just about done. Everyone, thank you for joining us here on Computer America. Tomorrow on the program, looking forward to this. I believe we're going to have a guest. He's joining us live here on the show, but it's going to be quite an inconvenience for him because I believe he's in Japan. I know, I'm serious. But we're going to have a company on called Reflare. He's the CEO of the company, and and yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. So everyone, tune in tomorrow. Computer America, Reflare, and yeah, more show. All the chatters in the chat room, everyone out there on the podcast, everyone out there on IRN, thank you so much for tuning in, and catch us next time. Bye, everyone.